Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Stop for a moment and think about your definition of a social worker. We banter the term around a lot, especially when it involves minority or low-income families. You know the image, the social worker as the bad guy who takes children away from parents or determines if you're fit to be a foster parent or even if you should receive social services. But is this the right image of the social worker? Aren't they so much more, and are we in the media guilty of marginalizing a noble profession? March is National Social Worker Month, and up next on Another View, you'll meet professionals who will share why all social workers stand up. Another View is next, so stay tuned.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. I want to say a special hello to a very special guest we have with us in our studio. Her name is Deborah Sult, and she's from our sister station in Las Vegas, Nevada, Vegas PBS. And Deborah and I have been spending the past couple of days working on my other job here at WHRV, and that is as managing editor or director for Skills Online. And that's our online learning portal for adult learners. And if you'd like to know more information about Skills Online, you can always go to skillsonline.org. But Deb, we appreciate you being here on the East Coast, and we wish you the very best as you fly back across the country. So speaking of professions, today we're going to talk about a very noble profession. And I think you may not have given this much thought, but more than likely at some point in your life, you've been impacted by the help of a professional social worker. The more than 600,000 licensed professional social workers in this country share one common goal: to help improve people's lives. And they cover the gamut, from children, families, and schools, to mental health and substance abuse, to medicine and public health. They are administrators, planners, researchers, and policymakers. And right here in Hampton Roads, we have one of the premier schools for academic training for social workers, the Ethelyn R. School of Social Work at Norfolk State University. March is National Social Worker Month, and here to dispel myths and teach us what's really involved in social work, our assistant professor, Dr. Sandra Williamson-Ashe. Dr. Williamson-Ashe, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
I'm so happy to have you here today. And also Dr. Kirsten R. Ericksen, who is also an associate professor with the school, correct?
I'm assistant professor.
Assistant professor. Yes. I apologize. Thank you so very much. They're both with the Ethelyn R. School of Social Work at Norfolk State University. So let's start the conversation by coming up with a definition, because I think a lot of people sometimes call themselves social workers, but a professional social worker is what, Dr. Williamson-Ashe?
A professional social worker is a trained professional, and as a profession, we are grounded in our core values that are established through the National Association of Social Work, and we are also empirical researchers. So we do not just haphazardly exercise any function. We have proven strategies, values, ethics, morals that we abide by as a profession. And there was, correct, at one time, lots of folks were referred to as social workers. However, as you mentioned, as policymakers, the National Association of Social Workers delved into that area and decided that if you were not trained and a graduate of an accredited program from CSWE, the Council on Social Work Education, then you could not be referred to as a social worker in that profession. And so Norfolk State has been accredited since its inception, and those accreditation values are what we utilize in the program to train social workers.
And Dr. Ericksen, you cover a wide area of social issues, I guess is the best way to put it, in terms of what does a social worker do?
You're absolutely correct. And When you enter the profession of social work, you obtain a generalist perspective and practice, and so you learn about the many ways to serve different people and help and work with different individuals. But then later on, you specialize, and so you're working with different populations in different ways. So, as you had mentioned, you might be working with youth, or you might be working in early intervention. You might be working with older adults. You might be working with mental health. All in a holistic manner. And then also there's the different levels of approaches in that sometimes you're working with individuals. And Dr. Williamson-Ashe also mentioned about working on a macro level. We call that in social work when you're working on policy development, because as we all know, those policies really do impact those individuals. But social workers try to work on those different levels of
So the image from the media, okay, of social workers, the two that came to my mind, one was if you've ever seen the show Judging Amy, and Tyne Daly, who happens to be one of my favorite actresses, but was like the uber social worker. I mean, she would do anything to make sure that her clients were taken care of and they had homes and she was just always there. And then the other image that came to mind was with Precious, the movie Precious. And that was not a positive portrayal
Right.
of a social worker. Are we at two ends of the extreme, or are the everyday social workers kind of in the middle?
I think they're kind of in the middle because what most people think of when they think of a social worker is someone who is going to remove the child or someone who is able to disseminate food stamps. And that is not the true picture of social work. So social work has been given less of a professional image than it is. And as professionals, what you might have seen in Precious is that burnout stage, because you have the ability to impact many lives. But when you are in the engagement process, sometimes you take on those behaviors and assume the responsibility, and it can be very heavy and burdensome. So that's why also in that training field of social work, we teach students how they have to lift up that shield from themselves in the separation for the professional image.
So, and I was going to ask about burnout at some point, because there is an opportunity. I would imagine if you're listening to and trying to help others come out of some pretty dire situations, Dr. Ericksen, that you would burn out sometimes. What does the profession do to protect against that?
We begin encouraging students when they are in the education system to actually practice good self-care. And for different people, that is different things. It can be exercising, it can be journaling, reading, dancing, doing something you enjoy, being sure to take time for yourself, because sometimes you do hear stories that are difficult. And so you have to try to separate yourself from that and not bring those things with you and carry them with you. But and also do some good self-care.
Is there a characteristic of a great social worker? I mean, are there certain things that you look for as you look at your students going through, or as you look at other professionals, that is there a thread there that's necessary in order to be a good social worker?
I think you have to have, when we're talking about self-care, you have to be able to do self-awareness, and you have to constantly do self-awareness. So if you're unable to make harsh judgments on yourself, then that would be one of the reasons why I would say this may not be the profession that you need to engage in right now until you learn to be able to do that, because you're going to have to do that at all times. You're going to have to be able to separate your biases. You're going to have to be able to be of service to people that you may not necessarily agree with things that they have engaged in. You're going to have to be competent. You're going to have to put that individual first, that dignity and worth of a human being first before yourself. You are not of the issue right now. Those persons have to be first.
Anything you want to add, Dr. Ericksen?
I'm thinking our profession is definitely one of service, and Dr. Williamson-Ashe is talking about has mentioned some of the core values that definitely guide our profession, and service is one of them. We definitely have to make sure that we are I was jotting down or thinking of some terms. I think of a good listener, be flexible, open to learning, and empowering the individuals we work with, because their story is different than anyone else's, and so it's important to remember that. And what one individual chooses as a life path may be different for another individual, and so empowering them to make their own decision about what path they would.
So,
like
in other
to
words,
choose.
if somebody is caught up in drugs, for example, you can't label every person that is caught up in drugs. You can't treat them the same way. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And a part of that profession is cultural competence. And that embodies knowing your clientele, because everyone has a different background, not only ethnically, but culturally. And so you have to be competent. It's not enough just to say that this person is or practices this one belief. You have to also be able to research that information. And of course, in our day and time right now, our schools are becoming even more diverse when we're speaking of school social workers. And so you have to be able to be culturally competent and reach everyone on the same level.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We're talking about the profession of social workers, and March is National Social Work Month. So if you are a social worker out there, give us a call so that we can thank you for your service. And if you have been impacted by a social worker and you'd like to share that story, give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So as I'm doing my research for this show, I was stunned to know that there are school social workers. I had no clue. And that's what I love about the show, because I'm always learning something new. So what, and you always hear teachers in the general saying, I'm not a social worker. I'm just here to teach. So what's the difference, and how does a school social worker work in that environment? I'll start with you, Dr. Ericksen, this time.
Sure. A school social worker, well, from an educational perspective, maybe I'll start from there. So they have a master's degree in social work, so they have to go to graduate school. And then beyond just receiving their master's degree in social work during their education, they will take extra courses about educational policy, and then they must become certified. So they take a state exam to become certified.
To be a certified school social worker.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so after they become certified and then they are working in the schools, there are many different ways that school social workers actually are involved in the school system. And basically, they are trying to help ensure a holistic approach to educating children. So the goal of a school social worker is to ensure that a child receives the best education possible.
Okay.
And when working with children, of course, there are different things that impact that within the school system. So sometimes my experience has been with educators and administrators. My experience was that they were very welcoming and saying, I've noticed that John seems distracted in class today. Would you mind seeing if there's something? And so sometimes when you talk with children or you discover different things going on in their lives, and that's where a school social worker comes into play, that we're looking at the whole child, not just what's happening with their education learning at the moment, like the math and the reading, but what is impacting, because we all know that your environment, what's going on at home, maybe some mom is sick with cancer, or maybe I didn't get enough sleep last night, or those kinds of things are impacting their learning in the classroom. So our goal is to try and ensure that they're having the best learning experience in the classroom.
So Dr. Williamson-Ashe, not every child then is seen by the social worker.
Absolutely not.
Okay, so how does that work? There has to be an indication that there's a problem?
Yes, and many different districts have things that are named differently.
Okay.
However, let's take one of the standard names, which might be a student success team. So a teacher or either a guidance person or a parent can refer their child or student to that student success team, And this student success team has a multidisciplinary approach. So it would be the school social worker, the school psychologist, it may be guidance, it may also be the assistant principal, etc., in that room to discuss the student. And because we're social workers, we take it from a strength-based perspective as well as a person and environment perspective. And what we're looking at is what is impacting their ability to successfully gauge that curriculum that the educator has put forth. And so when we do that, we look at a variety of situations, and we are the most intimate profession when it comes to education because we have the ability to go into the home and we bridge the gap between the home and the school and community. So not every student will come before a school social worker, but we're also a part of other teams. So if there's a crisis at the school, if there's been a school bus accident, there's been the death of a student, however, you may be called. Some schools, districts have school social workers in each individual school. I'm not the best proponent of that because I think sometimes when you matriculate too deeply into the school, you become absorbed and you cannot objectively see things. So I'm more of a proponent of some districts like Virginia Beach where you have a social worker assigned to several schools.
And you travel to
travel, yes. And so home visits are a great part of school social work. One of the biggest areas that school social workers work on also, other than disabilities, is chronic absenteeism, which of course prohibits students from being successful in the classroom.
So the image of the home visit is, people running around, everybody's cleaning up, they're going to come in. What happens during a home visit?
So in a home visit, there's an assessment because social workers are supported by empirical research. So we're there to do an assessment, not to gauge what's on the walls at home or what kind of furniture there is, but we're really looking to find out what the parent believes in that child. What do the parents see? What is the home life like? Is there consistency in the home, in the parenting? Who are the people that are involved with this child? Who does homework with the child? What is that homework hour like? So that's more what that process is like. It's having, like we're having here, a conversation about what you think about your child.
Mm-hmm. And then once you've made that assessment, Dr. Kirsten, then what happens to there? I mean, where does it go, and how does it manifest itself in the total care of that child?
So we're just, as we heard, just a small portion or piece of the assessment. And so that goes back to the success team. And different individuals may have gathered
other information.
Yes, exactly. And then they meet as a team, and the parents are invited, or the caregiver or guardian is invited to attend the discussion about what is the best way to serve this child, or how can we best educate.
And dispel the myth that the social worker's goal is to disrupt family life. Dispel that myth.
Absolutely not, because we are the bridge. We are the human piece to all situations. So we're trying to help people come together, to communicate better, to listen to one another, to have empathetic ears for one another and put themselves in one another's place. So when you hear CPS worker, Child Protective Services, so what they are doing is protecting the child. We kind of think about it on the back end of removing the child, but it is what is in the best interest of the child. And so even in school social work, when parents are a part, and they are a part of those success teams, nothing will take place without the parents' approval. And oftentimes when social workers go in the home, they can help kind of take that wall down with parents who may be frustrated. When you walk into a room and you have 10 professionals sitting there and they're telling you.
It's so intimidating.
Yes. So when a social worker gets the opportunity to go to the home, you can have a conversation and help them understand this process and help empower them through this process.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We're talking about the profession of social work, and Nicole joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Nicole. You're on the air.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having this important conversation.
Thank you.
My daughter is interested or has voiced interest in becoming a social worker, and we've researched programs at some of the schools. But I'm interested in wondering, what are some of the opportunities that we can be looking out for with our young adults who have an interest in becoming a social worker, for either opportunities of employment or experience or being exposed to this field? I was just wondering if you had any ideas what those entry levels or exposures would be at this point.
Nicole, is your daughter in college or high school? Tell me a little bit about her so that they can answer.
She expressed interest a couple of years ago. She's in college right now, freshman year. And right now we're getting, you got to get your prereqs out of the way. And as we look for opportunities, we want to make sure she's making a decision that she really wants to follow through with.
Okay. We'll let them answer. Thank you so much for your call. Which one first?
Well,
Go ahead,
Nicole, thank you for calling. I would first suggest that your daughter go out and look on the website, the NASW website, National Association of Social Workers, as well as the CSWE, Council on Social Work Education websites. That will give her more insight and information into the profession. I would also say, remember that social workers are first of service, and we are about social justice. So if she is interested, when we look at any opportunity to be of service to individuals or groups, she can do any type of volunteer work that would help give her that kind of insight. And, when we come to volunteers, we can't do without them. So even in the social work curriculum, at the last year, students have to perform a practicum placement that is guided through the educational process. But service is one of the key ingredients in being a social worker.
Oh, so get busy and let her start serving. Anything else you'd like to add, Dr. Kirsten?
One of the really encouraging things.
They call you Dr. Kirsten.
Yeah, that's
Dr.
fine.
K.
Anything close. What I find one of the encouraging things about social work is it is such a broad profession. We were specifically speaking about school social workers, but there are so many different populations and groups you can work with. So if you want to work with veterans, if you want to work with older adults, if you want to work in the medical system, if you want to work with children, there are so many different ways you can become involved as a social worker. So the NASW website is a great place to start.
Okay. Something else you'd like to add?
Yes. And Nicole, I also wanted to say that because we are trained professionals, it doesn't always limit us to the field of social work. So for instance, I was a former vice president for student affairs and enrollment management at Virginia Union University. And I was encouraged prior to completing my doctorate by Mr. Orton, who was an MSW, a graduate from Norfolk State University, and he was the city manager for Portsmouth. So it doesn't limit you in terms of the field. It's a very diverse profession.
Okay. Let's go to Heather in Virginia Beach. Hi, Heather. You're on the air.
Yes, I just wanted to say I've had many friends and colleagues that received their Masters of Social Work from Rutgers up in New Jersey, and a dear friend who received her MSW from Norfolk State. These people, as was just said, are diverse. My friend was second career who graduated from Norfolk State. Service, compassion, caring, excellent organizational skills, and team builders. I worked with most of the social workers in the hospital field, but they're just a wonderful, wonderful service-oriented group of professional men and women, and they are to be congratulated.
Thank you so much, Heather, for that call.
Thank
you guys want to respond to Heather?
Couldn't have said it better myself, Heather. Thank you so much.
We appreciate the call. Let's go to Krista in Virginia Beach. Hi, Krista. You're on the air.
Oh, hello there.
Hi.
Well, my comment was that my mother, in her late 80s, she's still alive, but in Seattle, Washington, she worked with the CASA program for many, many years as a volunteer. And I remember her just being exhausted because of the caseload that the social workers had. And their role was to sort of, step in and take over some of the overload. But she never had anything but praise for the social workers that she worked with. And I think she'd still be doing it to this day that she wasn't going to be 90 in May. But,
That's fantastic.
yeah. But anyway, I just wanted to say that I have the utmost respect for what these people do. I'm going to start crying because I remember some of her cases.
Oh.
Just like, oh gosh, heartbreaking things.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that there's things like CASA and the social workers out there. I now walk dogs at a retirement center myself, and I see some of the social workers coming in, and it's just one of those professions that never gets the recognition that they need.
Okay. Thank you, Krista, so much for the call. We appreciate that. You hear the emotion in her voice, Dr. Ericksen.
Mm-hmm. And it truly is a rewarding profession. It really is. So those who are thinking about the profession, I strongly encourage you to come join us.
Yes.
Yes.
And if you're just joining us today, we're talking about social work with assistant professors Dr. Sandra Williamson-Ashe and Dr. Kirsten S. Ericksen with the Ethelyn R. Strong School of Social Work at Norfolk State University. Try saying that 3 times. Absolutely. Listen, our phones are lit up, which is wonderful. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Let's talk to Wanda in Virginia Beach. Hi, Wanda. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara. How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Great.
I just want to take a moment and give a huge complimentary shout out to all of the licensed clinical social workers who work for the family support centers, enable medical centers, who take care of our military families. They are not only in the fabulous crop of social workers who are taking care of people for myriad life issues. They also are bridging the gap for our military families and that military family lifestyle that is so different. So I just wanted to give them a huge round of applause.
Oh, that is fantastic. Is there special training that they need, Wanda, in terms of dealing with the military? And I'm going to ask our guests, too.
Yeah, no, they do all the same training. They're licensed clinical social workers, just like your panel and all other social workers out there. But they have that extra knack and skill of helping those military families with those military family lifestyle issues of separations, relocations, all of the normal things that people reach out to social workers to help them navigate through in addition to the military lifestyle issues.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for the call. We appreciate that. You want to respond, Dr. Williamson-Ashe?
Yes, thank you so much for the call, Wanda. As well as at Norfolk State University in the MSW program, we do have a military certification, and it just provides just a little bit more endorsement for social workers. She's right. We have a myriad of skills that would be applicable for anyone, but just knowing a little bit more about the military families as well would be helpful.
Okay, and Tom joins us from Williamsburg. Hi, Tom. You're on the air.
Hello. Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
I guess just a statement and a question. I've been the recipient of social work services. My family has. Our son is autistic, and we've had several home visits when he was getting into the special education pipeline through the school system, and it was always very beneficial and helpful, and helped us as the parents gain some of that objectivity that we always seem to lack about our babies. And also on active duty, had a opportunity to interact with a lot of active duty social workers and civil service social workers. Dealing with, I was a medic, so dealing with folks who came in with, sadly, military sexual trauma and things like that, and always just the highest level of compassion and empathy and professionalism. But then I'm also a mental health professional now for many years, and have had the opportunity in the VA and the community services boards to work with a host of LCSWs. And the thing I always notice is kind of a lack of awareness of neighboring professions. And it's not unique just to social workers. I mean, talk about licensed professional counselors, clinical psychologists, psychiatric nurse practitioners. For all of those groups, it seems like there's a lack of awareness of, there's these other people that do things that are very similar to each other. And a lot of times there's some silos that get built up. Is there anything going forward for freshly minted MSWs or for the MSW that's been in the field for 10 years and is going back for some advanced degree, whether it be a Ph.D. or something else, to kind of cross-professional awareness that seems to be lacking. And I think social work would be uniquely positioned to do that because your national body is so strong.
Okay, Tom, let's let them respond, and we appreciate the phone call.
Oh, thank you, Tom, and happy Friday to you. I think you're right. There are silos created within those various professions, and social work would certainly be able to kind of reach out and create this collaborative effort. So it sounds like what you're talking about is a conference where we get an opportunity to kind of integrate with one another and share our professional stories. Social work has worked diligently in building up that professional body that you see, and they're probably going to be very cautious about how they hold on to it, and that has been because of the history of people being called social workers that really had not had the training. So, but because we are the professionals that we are and we're so very flexible, we know that there is more out there in terms of the social problems that need addressing than can a small body tackle. And so certainly I think that you're on the right track. And if any of our Ph.D. students are listening from the Ethelyn R. Strong School of Social Work, it sounds like there may be a dissertation in this for you.
And we have another caller who wanted to take their question off the air. But the issue about caseloads, do you know, is there an industry standard as to what is an acceptable caseload, and how do you, as a social worker, overcome? I'm sure it must be very frustrating if you've got all these cases, and how can you really pay as much attention to each of them as you need to? Let's start with you, Dr. Ericksen.
I think that's a balance that is probably a challenge even in life, I guess I would say. There are standards that have the national model of the School Social Work Association of America has developed some ideal standards and recommending 1 to 250 students in serving. And that sounds like a lot, but these standards are put in place to try and provide the most effective work with the individuals. And if you think about 360 days a year in the school system, you can manage that. I think probably as individuals in social work, we're hearing many callers mentioning that these people are empathetic and caring, and so we might do it to ourselves a little bit also and take on that extra, and that's where that self-care is very important to recognize I need to be the best professional I can be and manage the caseload I have.
So as a social worker, what is the goal? Is the goal to get to a certain point? And I guess I'm asking, how do you know when your case is done? That you've been successful. And it
really is dependent upon the case. Okay. Because some cases continue. But we're certainly trying to get individuals where they are independent and not in need of services. So they have to be able to survive. It is one of those things where you talk about, especially in the classroom, a teacher is thinking, how can I teach when this student is hungry? So you have to first serve the first level of service to get them to the next level of service of need.
So I noticed that there are a lot of people when they need to go to some sort of counseling, that they will go to a licensed clinical social worker as opposed to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. What's the difference in the, I guess, level of education, number one, and also types of services that you would receive?
A licensed clinical social worker, you've obtained your master's degree in social work, and then it requires that you actually receive supervision for several years, monitored supervision, and then you have to take a state licensing exam to obtain a clinical licensed social work position.
And so are you learning psychology then in that part of it, or what is it that you're being licensed to do, I guess.
So
is
you
my
are
question.
practicing at that time.
Okay.
So you're
Okay.
being supervised by someone who is already a licensed clinical social worker. It's really to make sure that you're doing the best job than what you should be doing, and all these things are in place for the profession. Because you're working with people, and so you want to make sure that you're providing the best service to those individuals, and sometimes they're very serious issues. So So you asked if you're talking about psychology, and of course you're integrating different theoretical perspectives, and we were talking about collaboration. That is so important, and it is important to be aware of it. Social workers, I would say, look more at consider the environment that the person is coming from. That's kind of what we add to the helping profession component, if you will. And so sometimes, as mentioned, we go on home visits versus coming to an office and seeing us in an office setting, but going to someone's home instead, or those kinds of environments.
How do you steer your students in Dr. Williamson-Ashe in terms of which area of social work, or is it kind of do they find their passion as they're going through the generalist?
They absolutely do find their passion. Most often, everyone comes in saying, "I want to help people," and that is a great start. And then I kind of push to the point where you're kind of doing an evaluation of yourself. So what areas would you like to stay away from? That kind of helps you to kind of narrow in and tunnel in on what you'd really like to do. And usually coming in, you have a more narrow focus of what social work is. And this in class, it allows you to expand that focus when you look at having to be involved in social problems, social issues. And most often, people neglect that macro level, the policy level, that yes, you can work on the congressional level. Yes, you can work with your state senators in formulating and in city council. So we kind of try to broaden that horizons for that through kind of a self-awareness task.
So dispel another myth that only poor people deal with social workers.
Absolutely not. And just like we just mentioned, the licensed clinical social worker, and I start out too by telling my class, I have a techniques in counseling class, that everybody has problems. Everybody has problems. I don't care what the mask looks like. And so I kind of take them on the social media track, you know, how people hide behind that, and either they forward themselves into bullying, or they put on this persona that everything is great, and then you see them the next week and something is wrong. So the myth is, of course, perpetuated by how social work developed. You know, we developed through settlement houses that dealt with immigrants and dealt with poverty, and we kind of didn't leave that area, even though we expanded as a profession. So we deal not only with poverty, we deal with those who are successful. We deal with counseling. We deal with team collaborations. We deal with any type of immigrant issues that may be spearheading school social work, and happy School Social Work Week next week to school social workers. We deal with any type of mediation that may be necessary, family problems, and this crosses the line of.
We've got a question. A caller wanted to know how they can transition to a career in social work. What are the must-haves in terms of degrees and experience? So I'm assuming they're already working in one field. Is it easy to make that transition?
I guess it would depend, how far along they are. I mean, we have many students who transfer into social work. If you've taken some prerequisite classes, most programs have those, and then you begin in your sophomore year. You're taking your
well, suppose you're in a helping career, but you don't have the certifications, the professionalism. That's where it would come in to go into like an Ethelyn R. Strong school, right?
Correct.
In order to get that, that education.
Yes, yes, and as was mentioned, our the social work degree is a professional degree. So that's another distinction between other helping professions. And so that title is protected by the General Assembly, who has given it title protection. So we see lots of great activists in the community and those kind, but they're maybe not always social workers. But obtaining that official degree gives you that protection. So if it says in the newspaper social work, they must hire someone who has a bachelor's in social work.
Got it. Lakeisha joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Lakeisha. You're on the air.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. My niece is a student, a ninth grader in Chesapeake Public Schools, and she has behavioral problems. And I was curious, how does social work incorporate in the situation that she's currently in?
Okay, Dr. Williamson-Ashe.
Hi, Lakeisha. Thank you for calling. Well, I would start by saying you're calling because it is an issue. And so social workers can become involved through the school system if the educational facility as well as yourself might approach them and saying, I would like to speak with someone that's in the school social work system. I myself worked for Chesapeake for a few years in their system. So one thing you could do is to set up a meeting, which would be something like a student success meeting. And this would give you an opportunity to then say, when you're setting up that meeting, that you'd like the social worker to be involved in that meeting to help give you some ideas and some feedback on particular things. And I would, too, encourage you, because she is ninth grade, I would encourage you to go ahead and set that meeting up.
Yeah, because ninth grade is that tipping point,
right?
Whether she will go on to high school and be successful or maybe not. And so now is the time to intervene. Thank you, Lakeisha, for the call. We appreciate that. Mary Alice joins us from Franklin. Hi, Mary Alice. How are you?
Barbara. How are you?
It's good to hear from you.
Good to talk to you. You were talking about the myriad of things that social workers can do. And back in the end of November, I took a dog of mine to the veterinary school at NC State. And while I was there, I discovered that they have veterinary social workers for people. Very often if you're going someplace like that, you're not getting good news. And so they have counselors there to help people deal with the news that they're getting.
Oh, wow. I hadn't even thought about that one.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you that they have that service available. And yes, people love their pets. So
absolutely.
That's how social
Mary Alice, what happened with your dog?
Well, he already had a bad diagnosis. He had bone cancer, and I was taking him to hopefully get him some pain relief. It was just palliative care, and he has since died.
Oh, well, we're sorry for your loss. Thank you so much for the call, though. It's good to hear from you.
Good to talk to you, Barbara.
Okay, take care. We'll talk soon. So we've got about 5 minutes left. I want to talk about, first of all, who is Ethelyn R. Strong, and how come she had a school named after her?
She earned that name, most definitely, for the School of Social Work. She is the founding dean for our school at Norfolk State University for the School of Social Work. In 1960, she founded the school, and it is so that was beginning with the Bachelor's of Social Work program, and we were the first approved by our accrediting organization in the state of Virginia. And she went on, previous to becoming the dean, she actually was a strong advocate for child welfare services in the community, and then she also went on to add the master's program. She approached the General Assembly and received support to be able to begin the graduate program in 1972.
And you said that this school has always been accredited from day one.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
So you guys are like one of the premier schools in the country,
we
right?
are.
We
we're
really
proud.
are. Yes, we really are.
So how many students and what does it take to, in other words, as a freshman, can I just come in and say, I want to join the Ethelyn R. Strong School of Social Work?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
And so we're about 700 strong, usually in and out, according to graduation. You really start taking your social work classes during your sophomore year.
Sophomore year.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that first year, of course, is just your prerequisites. When you get completing in your sophomore year to your junior year, you actually have to do an application piece to the Professional School of Social Work. And that allows us to make sure that you have what you need in terms of moving forward. It allows us to see where you are in terms of your anticipated graduation, what your goals are. And then your senior year, not only are you taking classes, but you are completing your practicum placement in the community in a social work approved agency.
And can you stop at your bachelor's, or do you need to move on to your master's?
You certainly can work with your bachelor's degree. Many of our students work with their bachelor's degree and come back and work on their graduate education also. Some are uncertain exactly which population they want to work with, so they want to work for a while and then determine which path they want to take for the graduate studies, because that would be more emphasis on the specific area like school social work or military or older adults or community engagement. There's many different avenues that you could select.
Now, both of you were, prior to teaching at the school, were actually school social workers, right?
Right.
Correct.
Can you talk about, just give me one example of a really rewarding thing that happened and then a challenge? And we got 2 minutes left.
Okay, so I will start with rewarding.
Okay.
And because we had a caller speak on military, and Tom, thank you for your service. There was, when I was a graduate student, I was working with the guidance department at a school that was very close to military housing, so students walked there. They had a problem with kindergartners not making it to school on time, although they had left on time. And so this was, I didn't think it was a big issue, but what we ended up finding out was that the students, when I called them into a group, they had no idea that there was a certain time that they had to be there. They thought as long as they just walked, and they're looking on the ground and they're looking at glass and bugs, and they're just enjoying the walk to school. So that was one of my rewarding. So sometimes you really just have to take the time to say it.
Okay. And Dr. Kirsten, I'm going to let you have a challenge.
Oh, a challenge. I wanted to share a success.
Okay, give a success then.
Success. And it's a broad perspective in that I was fortunate to be part of a school system that was just developing their program. And so I was able to be part of a multidisciplinary team in which we approached and worked with different youth in the school, but from educators, administrators, special educators, and social workers. We worked and developed a program to help support students in their success.
Fantastic. That is Dr. Sandra Williamson-Ashe and Dr. Kirsten S. Ericksen, both with the Ethelyn R. Strong School of Social Work at Norfolk State University. Thank you so very much for joining us, and we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Essie Patha-Merkerson from Law and Order. You are listening to Another View.
And welcome back. She was admired and idolized by some, hated and villainized by others. Her name, Queen Njenga. Lisa Godley recently spoke with a national historian who has written a book about this legendary African queen. Dr. Linda Hayward explains how Queen Njenga governed the kingdom that was once home to those first Africans who arrived at Old Point Comfort in 1619.
When those first Africans arrived at Old Point Comfort in 1619, they left behind a life that few people know much about. Life in the Kingdom of Angola.
These Africans did not come from the jungle. That's what people have to understand. These Africans were accustomed to Europeans. They were not intimidated by Europeans. They were from an organized kingdom, 20 to 30,000 residents in the capital, the urban centers.
Dr. Linda Hayward has studied the people of Angola for years. As a professor of African history and African American studies, she shared her knowledge consulting on numerous PBS television specials and museum exhibits, including African Voices at the Smithsonian.
The British at the time, in 1619, did not have a formal system of slavery. So the documentation that we've seen in Virginia, we collected every named African. And we know that these people had names: Maria, Pedro. When you see these names, these are Angolas.
This can be attributed to the Portuguese takeover of Angola in the 15th century. They had hoped to seize the land for gold, but found the selling of Africans as slaves to be much more valuable a commodity. It was during that time that the African warrior, who would one day be queen, named Ginga, came on the scene.
We know that Ginga was very much not satisfied with the way in which her brother was dealing with the Portuguese. She wanted him to be much more aggressive.
She served as his chief negotiator on several occasions. On her first meeting with Governor Correa of Portugal, only he was allowed to sit. So to establish her equality, she created her own seat.
When the Portuguese governor refused to give her a seat, Ginga called her servants. She had several servants accompanying her to show her status as an ambassador of an independent country. And she had the servant go on all fours, and Ginga negotiated from there. She would sit up and then sit down, and she was successful at negotiation. And when she took over in 1624, she, in fact, had a policy of, in fact, standing up more vigorously to the Portuguese.
This was something the Portuguese did not like, and she was forced into exile, but not into silence.
She was actively engaged in resistance, organizing warriors, being the head of a camp.
She formed alliances with other states, which evolved into a 30-year war against the Portuguese. Not only did she strategize, she led the troops into battle.
She was at the front of her army. The Portuguese were astounded. So this is not an ordinary person. This is a person whose role as the resistor of the Portuguese, as one who did not submit, and one who had global influence.
She is credited with inspiring the 20th century armed resistance against the Portuguese that resulted in Angola's independence in 1975. Despite numerous attempts, Queen Ginga was never captured by her enemies and lived to be 80 years old. Dr. Haywood says Queen Ginga's heroism is legendary, not only in Africa, but all over the world.
In Cuba, I collected a poem written by an Afro-Cuban, and here this poem, and it's all in the book. It honors Ginga, Queen Mother. You've come to me. It's amazing the type of impact Ginga has had in Europe, vilified, but still marveled at.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
Wow, Queen Ginga was something else. Absolutely. You can learn more about Queen Ginga in Dr. Linda Haywood's book, Queen Ginga of Angola, Africa's Warrior Queen, which is available in the Jamestown bookstore and on Amazon. Thank you so much for listening to Another View. If you'd like to hear the show again or share it with a friend, please visit our website, anotherviewradio.org, and download the podcast. We're on Facebook, so like us, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Ham Lee. And Another View producer Lisa Godley and I would love to hear from you about topics you'd like us to discuss on Another View. Please email us at contact@anotherviewradio.org and let us know what's on your mind. Next time on Another View, our roundtable pundits, Roger Chesley, Carol Pretlow, Bill Thomas, and Will Leviste, will share insight on current events, including the recent comment from Education Secretary Betsy DeVos that historically black colleges and universities were created as, quote, real pioneers of school choice. You won't want to miss that discussion. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is off today, so special thanks and a shout out to Hearsay with Kathy Lewis producer Hannah Martin. And we appreciate you stepping in, Hannah. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Jaden Baden answered our phones. Jada Baden answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Thanks so much for listening to Another View.